supply chain, consulting, warehouse operational, market share, revenue, material handling, sales, transportation.
It's the end of the week. It's the end of the week. It's the end of the week. It's the end of the week.
So it's not exactly the end of the week.
Almost the end of the week.
Almost the end of the week. But we are recording this today because tomorrow we have our quarterly meetings and I have a shareholders meeting and we have all these busy things. And so we just can't make time for a podcast tomorrow.
I don't think it's the first time we don't do it on a Friday anyway, so we
It
adapt.
isn't?
No, we had
Well, no.
we had a Thursday, yeah.
And then because we have young Jeffrey from LA back in Montreal, he
Back again.
begged
to get on again.
to be back on.
Because he had such a great experience the first time
Yeah,
with me.
it was a very good episode.
I thought it was okay. Got
Yeah.
some show notes, so hopefully I can improve this
You
time
never
around.
shared them with us.
Yeah, sure. What's the main one?
Well, I've been told I'm a boring speaker my whole life. A little monotonous. So
That's
I'd
interesting.
like to work on that.
I do remember Jeff. So for people who don't know, Jeff was a lifeguard, right?
Yep.
At my community pool. And I do remember you'd already come up to me and say, "Oh, I want to come and do an internship." And I said, "Okay, that's great." I remember though, like a few weeks later, I was forced, and I mean forced, to go to awards night at the end of the season. And when I was a kid, they had awards night, and they give kids awards, right? But now, the way the world's evolved, the parents want awards. So there's like greatest volunteer, greatest barbecuer, most likely to be, and all the kids sit there and they have to clap as their parents get awards, and their parents just feel like so great. But Jeff, I remember you spoke, and I was so impressed because you come across, like
What?
well, like a Neanderthal. You're a big jock. You're very athletic. You're always talking about like protein shakes and seaweed dust that you put in your water, and so you happen to be a very smart guy who's also a jock, and it was really stunning when you did speak for the first time. You had such a command of the audience, and I thought, okay, yeah, we'll keep him on board.
I appreciate you saying that. It's really nice of you.
That's about as nice as I'll get.
Yeah.
So Jeff, what do you want to talk about today?
So one of the things that I've had the ability to do is being here for so long, I get to hear all these war stories about how it used to be, and while I think most of them are, probably left better to be not on the podcast, I thought it'd be interesting to talk about, like, from a consultant's perspective, from a project, dealing with a client. How do we do that work now, and how did we used to do it, and what do we think is like changed a lot, and what is like exactly the same? Because I think everyone thinks that it's completely different from, the time that you guys were analysts, right? 15, 20 years ago. But I think
25.
But I think there are things that are way, way different. Like if we look at how you do modeling, and then there's things that, are the same. And then if we have enough time, maybe we can talk about what we think that's going to look like 10 years from now.
Cool. Well, as the senior person here, I'll start. The first thing, so Dave and I come from the same company. We both started in the same environment. If you said, what is the thing that has changed the most over the years, it is data. Mm-hmm. The amount and quality of data available, right? So when my first project with a man who's now retired, Walter Harrigan, one wonderful guy who's the VP of operations of Perkins Paper, which is a company that got purchased. It was a food service company in Taunton, Mass, which many people know is very close to where the New England Patriots play football. Okay, so they had mainframes. Like we didn't even talk like servers. They were called mainframes, and the data would be stored on mainframes, and that meant when we made a request for data, they pulled the data and shipped FedEx a tape, a cassette tape, not even like a tape, but I mean a tape like it was
On a roll.
film, you know? And they gave me all these printouts of how the data was stored. And I had to take this data, send it to, there was one company in Montreal, which was really lucky that Montreal happened to have this kind of company. Like Toronto, like other cities didn't have a place that would convert data from tape to, I forget what. It wasn't floppy disks, but there was it went to another kind of tape medium that we actually, because we had this big server room and we had the machine to read that. So I had to change it, not the type of data, I had to change the medium the data sat on, from one physical medium to another. That was challenge one. Then challenge two was, in those days when you stored enormous amounts of data, which warehouses generate and supply chains generate enormous amounts of data, you had to plan for how you were going to store data on tape. So imagine the tape is 900 feet, right? It's a spool of 900 feet of cellophane or whatever, cellulite. And you planned how you could use every inch of that data, that thing, to maximize how much data you could put on it. You just think about that. It's crazy. And there was this format, this data format called IPSIDIC. And IPSIDIC was a way of taking a very large number. Let's say item, like, you know how item numbers, like how let's say a number was 98123, and you would not want to store it that way. You would want to shrink it. And I don't even I really to this day still don't understand. It was almost a set of symbols that allowed you to collapse a large number into a tiny space, so that 22,000,000.73 would take up the same space as 12, the number 12, on this tape. And so we had to do this, like, extracting usable data was half of my job as an analyst.
So how long would that whole process take to win?
Weeks. It would take them weeks to get the data.
Yeah.
Then the FedEx was overnight. It would take me a week to send it over to the company for conversion, and then it took me at least a week. Everything was easy except for some of these IPSIDIC format things. I mean, all my engineering brain power was being spent on how do I take this like Egyptian hieroglyph and turn it into a usable number. And so imagine 4 weeks, whereas today, people can extract data within a day. They can upload the data on a secure on our own secured website. We can download that data, read it in. We have the amount of storage is so many billions times greater. We don't worry about what are the tricks to manage data. David, do you remember leading zeros and trailing zeros?
That was a source of mistake. But with the story that you just told, it's hard to believe there's only 5 years between you and I, because I never had to do this.
So you never had to?
I never had that.
No, but 5 years, absolutely.
Yeah, I never had that. The leading zeros you had, exactly, they would not just disappear. You had to account for them as you read in data. It was a mess.
Well, that's popped up in my time.
But you know what? Once, though, on the leading, so for everyone understands, you declare a number field, right? 9 long, let's say. And if the number was 12, it would read 00000, and then 12. And you always had to be careful of that, because if you got it wrong, you could cause all sorts of chaos in your programming.
Yeah.
I had one of those problems once. I did a network study for a company that sadly went bankrupt during 9/11. it delivered food to to the airlines. It went bankrupt because of 9/11. Right? You can imagine what a disaster that for everyone, but in particular for the airlines. And we went for our preliminary presentation, and we showed them their network, and everyone loves a map, right?
Yeah.
You take all their volumes
Loves a map.
and you show that, it's hot, you do a lot of volume in California, Texas, all the hubs, of course, were where your volume was. But then I remember the owner who I had seen on CNN like 6 months later talking about the impact of 9/11 on his business. But I remember he looked at it and he said, well, this is really strange. He didn't know there was an error. This is really strange. We actually do a lot of volume in Boston, but you guys are showing we have no volume in Boston. And then the next point I was about to make is, and we have about 13% of your volume that we can't attribute to anything. Well, as anyone American who's listening to this knows, Boston is part of the Northeast area where the first digit of the zip code is
a
zero.
Yeah.
And we treated that as a leading zero, and we removed it from the data, and therefore a zip code of 1234
Doesn't
was
exist.
a bad zip code.
Yeah.
Huh. Wow. But and back to your medium, just even when it was starting to be more closer to what we have in terms of the medium on which data was stored, just the integrity of it was so bad. Like now it's,
Yep.
I mean, we'll have like unclean data, but yeah, just the amount of time that had to be spent on looking at it, cleaning it, getting only a portion of it that kind of made sense.
But that, I mean, 100%.
And that's
Data cleaning was the other thing that took up. Let's say you did
a large chunk of time.
30% just getting data, 30% cleaning data, and then 40% analyzing the data. Whereas today it is 90% data analysis and 10%
And
on
when
the
it
other stuff.
and when it is longer on the cleaning, it's almost always correlated to that customer running on a really old piece
Old
of software.
system,
Mm-hmm.
depends on the industry, right? People who have bad data or bad data sits where data doesn't matter. So
What are part dimensions?
right, like if
Parts is always a
if
tricky
I'm
one,
in the
yeah.
spare parts world,
Yeah.
I'm never gonna have great dimensions because why?
You
It's
don't
too
care.
much energy. They should, but right? And there's so many exceptions, nesting and all sorts of things that may go.
Yeah.
But let's say if you go to the food industry, the reason that today the idea of bad data is kind of silly is because that data is so mission critical to their operations that data is mercilessly kept clean for their own day-to-day operations.
And how would clients react to that process? Because even today you get data and it takes a couple of weeks to have any results. Sometimes it takes a month, and I've found more, especially recently, people really want to see things right away and they want things to happen quickly. So when you have like a 6 week from before you even can get started, like did everyone just kind of say,
No.
yeah, this is how it is, or were they like, what are you doing?
Actually, even more than that, everyone valued it. There was an economic value to that exercise. They didn't just go like, oh yeah, you have to clean the data. They're like, this is such a great exercise that we're going through. And because what you'd do is you'd say like, here's a list of all your cases that are over 40 pounds. Here's a list of all your cases under 5 pounds. Here's a list of all your cases with more than
Cube.
24 inches width. You do that, and they'd be like, "Wow, and because we were operationalizing data, using data to make was important, and they knew that. So, operating systems that would manage a warehouse traditionally in those days would be looking at quantities like units, cases, right? But everyone knew that we had to get to volume, right? Or volumetrics, like cubic movement of product, palletizing, and so the exercise we did had huge value to them. So it was not, it was a pain in the butt for the warehouse people. Because especially like night shift people, the night shift supervisor often got lists and was told, go out and measure these boxes.
Or the typical warehouse high and tie, so layers per pallet and cases per layer of 99 and 99.
99 and 99.
That means like when they enter, like they didn't care, and then you had to,
On that first project, I remember we showed them the list of the highest inventory items. There's one item, it had 98,000 on hand.
Quantity?
Right? Sorry?
Quantity 98.
Quantity 98,000. Now imagine it was a food service distributor. There's not unless it's like spoons.
Yeah.
But if it's food, you don't have 98,000 of anything.
Yeah.
Unless you overbought ridiculously, and you're sitting on, a post-apocalyptic quantity of canned tomatoes.
Right.
And then they had no idea what it was, and they went and they researched. The next day they found out, oh yeah, because it was 98,000 units in the freezer, and they were like baffled. I remember Walter called the next day laughing, and he said, "Oh, you know what it is? That's where we record the number of pallets we have in the warehouse."
Yeah.
In the freezer. Like we could have designed the world's largest freezer when actually, those pallets, most of them are actually on the road all day long.
Right.
But now it's clients mostly take it for granted that this ability that we have with data is a must in what we do. And I'm not saying everyone is good like we are, but the Economist, I think, many years ago was saying that information is now more valuable than oil as a resource. And since then, it's just normal to talk about data and the ability to treat data as a what's where I'm looking
I think
for,
that's
like,
really
as a
true,
basis.
though. If you're thinking about how do we stay competitive,
Yeah.
how does any company stay? One of the things people don't appreciate maybe about a business, like we say this a lot, right? Just generally in terms of sales, like a shark bites everything that comes in its path because animals don't have the luxury of saying, I got a meal coming to me later on. I don't have to worry. You never have the luxury. You always go for whatever calories are in front of you, and but a related thing to that is if you think that what you do today in a knowledge economy business like ours, if you think that what you do today or what you have been doing for 10 years is going to keep you alive for the next 10 years, you are kidding yourself.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think your point, David, is like there is a commodification that has occurred. Everybody can collect data. Everybody, we used to in the early days, not here at LID, but even in an early part of our careers, when we said we make data-driven decisions, that was rare because we had to invest $100,000 in hardware to process this data, and not just that. When we would do network studies, or like the worst thing, you'd run a program, and that program to analyze data would run for 45 minutes. It's not instant like it is today, or relatively instant. And if you'd have these situations where you'd realize you made a mistake, and that mistake was 4 programs ago, and we would do this thing where we would submit a chain of programs to the server with the correction, and we'd leave for the night.
Come back the next day.
Praying that
It
when
went
you
well.
came back
No
that
errors.
it worked.
Yeah.
And of course, like if you got it right, 70% of the time it didn't, but 30%, like 1 in 3 chance, no, you would lose hours. But I say that to say, your point about like next 10 years, we cannot assume that even like core analyses and we have quantitative perspectives that we bring to the table. They are not going to be sufficient, right? And that's why, actually, Jeff, you should talk about this. One of the initiatives that we started in the last 2 years was incorporating simulation into our work. And I want to be clear, because sometimes our competitors are listening. Well, actually, I don't want them to know this, but we don't approach how do we approach simulation? And how do we think about?
Yeah, I think the simulation piece for us is like an additional piece of the puzzle. So we're not approaching it trying to say, hey, this is a new type of project that we're going to do, but on a path to designing a warehouse or optimizing an existing space, you're going to have these questions that come up where traditional data modeling, an Excel table that tells you how many pallets you're moving per day, isn't going to answer the question. It's a dynamic problem, and it needs a solution that's dynamic. It needs a moving, breathing model that can actually show you how many pickers are in aisle 10 on a busy Tuesday. And you can't really do that in Excel. You can sort of make a guess, but it doesn't really answer the question. So we kind of approach it as like a micro simulation or like a value add as part of a bigger project where we can just now answer more questions that they're asking and just give better answers to those questions.
100%. And some of those questions are like nuances or little fine details, but they're beautiful details.
Yeah.
And then others, though, what because David and I think you to some extent, but certainly we have encountered projects where you hire the simulation firm to do a simulation. So we do it, and it's very static, right? We do our design, we give them the design, they do the simulation, and we say works or not works. And 99 times out of 100 it works, because we understand the basics. But when you take the data analysis we do, all the ways in which we can run permutations and different combinations and scenarios, we can bring an entirely new almost dimension to the output that a simulation can provide. And I think that's the kind of thing when you say, well, 10 years out, what are we looking at? That certainly is how we marry our traditional data, deep mining, algorithm-driven analysis with simulation.
Yeah.
But, I don't know if you're going to roll your eyes, but when you talk about future, it's hard, at least these days, to not think about AI. And I don't have an answer for this. I don't know how.
See, it's funny. When I think about the future, I think about a cottage on Lake Massawippi in North Haven. But you think about AI.
No, but how?
how can you not?
You talk about the commodification.
You go to North Hatley and you'll start thinking about that.
How data analysis can be commodified, or it becomes a commodity. And I'm not talking so much about the expertise in the field of supply chain and logistics, but just how you actually manipulate data.
Ooh.
Holy crap, that was close.
I didn't know that did that.
Okay, you did that. But that the ability to crunch data and to find trends and patterns and teach to the models, what comes out. Here's we designed a warehouse, and that's the result, and it was it was properly sized, once, and then you through machine learning, or you feed and say, this is for this kind of operation, this solution works.
Right.
Yeah.
Rather than actually, not instead of doing the analysis, but there's got to be something. I mean, it's not just, I'll say, simple jobs that are going to be replaced. Like eventually in legal, in media, in art.
Well, it's interesting. Sure, media and art, but let's talk logistics for a second, because I once again, I said this with Jorge last week. I think that the AI, ChatGPT, and the BARD are exciting, but give me a break. I think the exaggerated hype in terms of they're going to write new Seinfeld scripts.
Yeah.
It is not going to write
Tarantino style.
It will, but it'd be a show that bombs.
Yeah.
But what I would say on the flip side, when we talk about autonomous mobile robots in the warehouse, which increasingly will take over the world, there's a lot of long-term advantages to that kind of solution if you're looking at automation. But what enables autonomous mobile robots to work is the ability for it to collect enormous amounts of data, visual and auditory data, and make decisions based on that. And I think it's interesting when you say that, you go, well, it's collecting a lot of data, and there are things that we're going to be able to do to give us even greater insights into how to design and optimize industrial processes, leveraging this absolutely new universe of data that is being collected by these things.
Yeah.
I think, and then the other piece that I'll add is that, you can, there are going to be ways that we will resort to these tools, because we can, again, take another leap in accelerating all of these. The thing that took 6 weeks before now takes a week, but it should, it'll take a day or a couple of hours.
Yep.
You'll be able to read in data with support from these software tools. So much more easily.
We have somebody who's been experimenting with that, and apparently some very good results.
you talk about that, like all that work you had, that 6 weeks, like that. You can't spend your time solving the problem that the client really wants to solve. And I know you said, well, they actually wanted you to do that because that was the only way. But the more time that our people can be spending on actually solving the problem and not doing the associated, oh, I got to read this in, oh, there's an error here, and those tools will just elevate,
It's
our
so
service.
funny you say that. Like when you think about it, it's that when we started, maybe 30-40% was pure analysis.
Right.
Today, maybe it's 90% pure analysis. Tomorrow, maybe it'll be 50% pure analysis, because not because of the inefficient byproduct work that has to happen, but because you will be liberated, right, from that, so that you can actually do other types of.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, Jeff. I do have a question. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Do you know what Emilio does at Lid?
Emilio? Who's Emilio?
You know, down the hallway there, Emilio.
Oh yeah, yeah. I used to go to school with that guy.
Hmm.
Yeah. No idea.
Isn't it? It's as mysterious as whether NASA has an alien spacecraft or not. You know, he does something. He's always got, he's always got the, but no idea what he does. Have you figured it out, David?
Not yet. Maybe if we asked him.
No, I ask him. Every time I ask him, he starts giggling. He says, "Oh, I got a meeting."
Well, looking busy is an important part of the job, right?
Looking busy is very important.
Yeah, George
That's
Costanza.
why I always walk so quickly.
If looking busy is the most important part of this job, Charles Eldon is not doing it well.
But that's what George Costanza said. He said when you look annoyed, you look busy or something like that.
I think this is a great place to end, because I think we went on a long data discussion, which I'm sure is going to be exciting for at least one person out there at some point.
They'll find the 40 seconds that was worth listening to somewhere in this, half hour.
Well, have a great one, and very excited about our meetings tomorrow.
Yeah,
Have a
that's
great
gonna be fun.
weekend.
You too.